Call to order of a regular meeting, Goodyear City Council, October 4th, 2010. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation led by Councilmember Cavalier.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join us in prayer if you wish. Heavenly Father, please help this council make the decisions that are the best for our citizens and for the community. Please watch over our city staff, our fire and police personnel as they do their job. And please bring our servicemen home safely from overseas where they are protecting our shores. All this we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. All members of council are here this evening. We have no expenditures to approve and ratify, and we have no communications on our schedule right now. Opportunity now for anyone from the public to address the council on any subject which is not on this evening's agenda. Would anyone like to talk about a non-agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda. I'll ask the city clerk to read consent items A through J by title only, please.
Item A, approve draft minutes of a work session, regular meeting, and a special meeting that were held on September 13th, 2010. Item B, approve a request from Randy Nations representing SPE Go Holdings, Inc. for a person transfer series 07 liquor license number 07070250 for Estrella Mountain Golf Course located at 15205 West Vineyard, Goodyear, Arizona. Item C, 1. Approve a request from Janice Martin for a Series 09S liquor license number 09070362S for Safeway number 1511 located at 14175 West Indian School Road. Item C2, approve a request from Janice Martin for a Series 09S liquor license number 09070127S for Safeway number 2618 located at 440 North Estrella Parkway. Item D, approve a request from Bradley Clark representing Bunker Indoor Golf and Training LLC for a person transfer series 07 liquor license number 07070236 for Bunker Indoor Golf located at 23033 North Pebble Creek Parkway A-104 Goodyear, Arizona. Item E, approve the final plat for Pebble Creek, Phase 2, Unit 42, Phase 2, subdividing 13.42 acres into 50 single-family lots and 3 tracts generally located northwest of the intersection of Saraville Avenue and Clubhouse Drive within the Pebble Creek Phase 2 pad subject to stipulations. Item F, accept the dedication of portions of Minnesota Avenue and Indian School Road along with the public utility easement associated with the Section 23 sewer system special public improvement cost recovery area located within Section 23. Item G, accept the water line easement from Kevin L. and Cynthia L. Cooley, husband and wife, for a 10-foot wide water line easement across their property located at 1696 North La Frisia Drive. Item H, adopt Resolution 10-1401, authorizing the presiding judge and city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Glendale that would provide the Protective Order Service Coordinator, housed by the Glendale Police Department, access to certain data in the Goodyear Municipal Court automated system so that the coordinator, who serves the West Valley, may more effectively assist customers of the Goodyear Municipal Court. Item I, adopt Resolution 10-1403, approving the amendments to the lease purchase agreements and trust indentures pertaining to the Goodyear Public Improvement Corporation, Series 2007 bonds and Series 2008 bonds, authorizing the issuance of the corporation's municipal facilities revenue refunding bonds, Series 2010A, for the purpose of refunding a portion of the Series 2007 bonds and Series 2010B bonds for the purpose of refunding a portion of the Series 2008 bonds, authorizing the taking of all other actions necessary to the consummation of the transactions contemplated by this resolution, and delegating certain duties. Item J, adopt Resolution 10-1404, adopting foreign trade zone tax policy for the City of Goodyear dated October 4, 2010, which supersedes and replaces foreign trade zone tax policy for the City of Goodyear dated July 13, 2009, directing staff to comply with the terms of the policy and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Would anyone in the public wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor, we have several, the A, E, G, I, and J, all from Roger Matlin.
Say that again, please. A, B,
A, E,
P, B.
E, G,
I,
I, and J. Adam, Edward, George, I,
Isabel.
very good, and J, Jim.
okay. Would anyone on council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
I'll just add some questions. I have some questions on I, but they're general. I'll wait to...
Okay, then we'll get those one. Okay. Mr. Matlin, are these, you want these pulled, or do you have questions on them? Okay, so
Come on up here.
all right. Okay, could I have a motion then to approve B, C, D, F, H? Is that correct? Yes. Could I have a motion to approve those, please? Motion from Councilmember Loretano, second from Councilmember Osborne. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Lord? Aye. Councilmember Sousa?
No.
Councilmember Cavalier?
Aye.
Councilmember Osborne? Councilmember Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano? Mayor Kavanaugh?
Aye.
Passes 6-1.
Okay, Mr. Matlin? And first one is on the draft minutes.
Oh, no. A was for business. That's the, Roger Matlin, Goodyear, Arizona. A was for business for the,
All right, so we'll retain A.
Sorry.
Okay. Echo
For the-
E
detention.
was the final plat for Pebble Creek.
So, yes, starting out with Pebble Creek. My question on that was, based on the latest data showing the contamination plume that's been expanding here in Goodyear, it shows that based on the data, it shows that the contamination has re-expanded underneath Pebble Creek. And I was wondering, does notice have to be given to the residents or the builders that are now going to build on this new development or this new section of the property? And this is just a concern because obviously older people living in that neighborhood are more subject to some health risks, and it's certainly a concern of mine. So I want to make sure that they are aware of what is a potential health risk to them.
Okay, is the plume in the public report?
I don't believe it is, but we will make certain that there is proper notification given as required by law. I mean, I can't picture the plume map right now, but it has not really wandered into Pebble Creek, as I recall it.
Yeah, it's in parts of Pebble Creek.
Okay. We will make,
But it's been there.
invite Indians.
We will make sure that everything is implemented
No, no, no.
according to law, though.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and in fact, it's west of Bullard, and apparently in the last
And it's
test
north of
results.
Thomas. So it's-
Yes,
yeah,
and the
okay.
last test results have shown it is, again, expanding to the west. So,
Okay,
all right?
and we'll do as the city manager just suggested, okay? Okay, we're now on G, which is acceptance of a water line easement for the Del Camino lift station upgrade project.
And the question on this had to do with, it's not described in the documentation that was online, what exactly this pump station is for. So I did my own research. Want to have to call for Elmo or, but it shows a number of items that it could potentially be removing from water, and I'm just trying to figure out what is the station for? What is its purpose? And is it removing contaminants that are in the water, or is it removing something more serious? Because lift stations of this nature, as you can see, as I've highlighted in green here, can be used to remove some pretty nasty chemicals. And if there's a problem with the water line, again, this is a health and safety issue in the city. Unfortunately, in the reports, it didn't say what the purpose of the
Do we have
station is.
Gal to respond?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of council, that station that Mr. Matlin refers to is a wastewater lift station, collecting wastewater from that area of the city. Been in operation for a number of years. The conflict is with the water line, maintaining separation from water and sewer. That's the reason for getting the easement to relocate the water line. But it's a common wastewater lift station, just like the other 12 that we have.
Were the two lines too close together? Is
Yes,
that
sir.
it? And they've been that way then?
No, this would have been a relocation.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Okay, I, India.
Okay, item I. Do I need to re-announce my name, or?
No, you're good.
Okay.
These are the, okay, go ahead.
The concern here is, again, just reading through the documentation that was online, in a number of different spots, it refers to the total savings of the reissuance or refunding of bonds estimated at $1.5 million for the current fiscal year 2010 through 11 and the following two budget years. In a number of spots during the discussion, it talks about present value and again refers to that this is a $1.5 million estimate for what appears to be $105,105,000 worth of bonds. I'm trying to figure out what is the savings timeline. It seems like it's 3 years, but is that 1.5 million all in year 3? Is it in year 1? And is that a real cash flow number? Is that a present value number?
Okay.
That is the savings.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like Larry Lang to answer that question, please.
Good evening. This is the proposed financing we discussed in the work session a couple of weeks ago. The paperwork or the resolutions have a not to exceed amount of $70 million and $34 million, but the actual transaction is right now estimated at about $28 million. We put it at the high end to be able to refinance all the bonds should some miraculous change happen in the bond markets over the next couple weeks, but not likely. So the savings on that, the present value savings, are $1.5 million on that $28 million. Those savings, that works out to present value at about 4.5%. The actual savings, $600,000 of that will come this fiscal year, and about 200 or 150 to 200 actually for the next 4 fiscal years. That's slightly different than what we talked about a couple weeks ago, where that total was estimated about $1.2 million, and that was going to take place over 3 years. Now it's over 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, can I just
Yes.
follow up on that?
I'm sorry, yes.
Just real quick, Larry, 600,000 this current fiscal year?
That's correct.
We have, if I'm not mistaken, in the budget, we had some savings from the construction of the stadium that was going to be used to help reduce the general fund transfer in this fiscal year, as I recall.
That was on the Reds practice facility,
Right.
and that would be about $2.2 million, and that's separate from this.
And that's my question. Is this 600 going to allow us to reduce the general fund transfer another 600,000 this fiscal year?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I want to know. And then you have 200,000 apiece for the next 4 fiscal years afterwards. So that would also help reduce the general fund transfer by 200,000 on estimate for those other.
Yeah, that's high end. I'm going to say 150 to.
Okay. But
200.
that'll help bring down that general fund transfer payment.
That's
That's where I was
correct.
kind of getting at.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and last one is J. Juliet, and that's adopt foreign trade zone tax policy.
All right. Item J, and this is having to do with the foreign trade zone policy. In reading, again, the documentation that was offered online, it doesn't seem clear to me what exactly the benefit is to the companies in this program and exactly what the benefit is to the city in this program, because it seems to be that 100% of what would be property tax is still being paid by the recipients of this in this pilot program, but just in a different format, a partial property tax and partially through the pilot fee. So I was trying to understand how exactly that worked, and in reading through all the documentation and the law itself, it's not really clear what an active property is. And so I wanted to verify whether or not is a piece of vacant land considered an active property if it is in the zone, or does it have to be built on at the time it receives these benefits? And really coming down to it, what is the benefit to the city? What's the benefit to the company? And how does that play out over a period of time? Can somebody provide some numbers of how it, say, over the next 5 years,
Okay.
some kind of example of this is what the property taxes would be, this is what it is under the pilot program, and these are the taxes, and these are the pilot fees that are being paid on the program, and how that breaks down. Basically, how does that benefit get back to the community here that's providing that?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like Sarah Chilton, our Assistant City Attorney, to respond to that.
And let me just ask one final question. Does a company have to be a foreign company or doing business in an economy outside of the United States in order to be in a foreign trade zone? Or basically can I apply for foreign trade zone status with a consulting business? Or is there something unique to this that puts it in that grouping?
Okay. Mrs. Chilton.
Mayor Kavanaugh, council members. The tax policy is a clarification of something that already exists. Previously, the council adopted a resolution approving the formation of a Greater Maricopa Foreign Trade Zone. And it's a consortium of cities in the West Valley, and it was intended to promote foreign trade. Foreign trade is governed by federal statutes. It's defined as to the qualifications or the requirements as to who's entitled to participate or who's considered eligible to operate within a foreign trade zone. The federal government will award, I guess it's a grant of authority to operate a property that's designated as a foreign trade zone. What the City Council did was, because we had certain property that had existing structures that were being taxed, and so we had taxing jurisdictions that were used to receiving tax revenues on a set amount of assessed valuation, the council was concerned about taking that out of the tax base when you had jurisdictions who are already receiving the benefit of those taxes. And, you didn't have the same issue when it was vacant land, but when you had a property that was already being on the tax rolls and you had mostly your school districts who are receiving tax revenues. So the cities who are involved in this consortium came up with this concept of a pilot fee. Let me back up. Under Arizona law, when property is in a foreign trade zone and it has been activated, again, that is a federal term. It's a term of art. You go through a process where you apply. Your operations have to qualify under federal law for activation. But if you are activated at that time, Arizona will reassess that property as Class 6 property. And so instead of being taxed at a 20% assessment ratio, it's taxed at a 5% ratio. So we were looking to at least stabilize, or to some extent stabilize revenue sources for taxing jurisdictions on property when they were already receiving the benefit of, say, the building. And the one that we're really talking about is the Palm Valley 303, the 440,000 square foot facility that Sub-Zero is in. So our tax policy provided for the payment of a pilot fee that was supposed to represent the difference between the taxes that would have been paid on those existing facilities before the activation and what you receive under the 5% assessed valuation, and that's called the payment in lieu of taxes. Mr. Matlin is correct that there is some stabilization of revenues. It's a flat fee during the whole time they're activated. So you could, for instance, if Sub-Zero didn't activate, they would continue paying their regular assessment. But once they applied for activation, they'd be required to enter into an agreement to pay this pilot fee based on the existing facilities or the valuation at that time. And it doesn't go up and down. It's just one set time at the time of activation. When we got into looking at this and doing our first pilot agreement, we realized, and lucky us, we're the first ones in, and we're happy to be there, but we realized that a lot of terms weren't defined. There was a lot of vague. The policy was vague. We understood conceptually what we wanted, but we wanted to have more certainty, which is why we had this amendment. But in terms of activation, again, it's a federal term. It's governed by federal law. It's something that the operator who qualifies under federal law will apply for activation with a grantee, and then it's either approved or not approved. One of the requirements for the grantee to support activation within the foreign trade zone is the execution of the pilot agreement. It will only apply if a taxing jurisdiction is already receiving revenues on existing structures at the time they enter into the foreign trade zone. So,
Sarah, would you also please answer Mr. Matlin's question about could he apply for a foreign trade zone?
I don't think so. I'm not a grantee, but my understanding is that, and you might get more information from the presentation that's being done, because we're looking to bring some more property into the foreign trade zone, and we have Curtis Spencer here, and as well as Harry Paxton, who's been working more on the operation of the foreign trade zone. But you have to be bringing goods in through foreign trade, and it has to do with tariffs. So I don't think you pay for tariffs. The primary benefit of foreign trade zones is when you're taxed. So you're not paying the import taxes. so that we don't discourage manufacturing, piecemeal manufacturing, where you may do a piece of assembly somewhere else and then bring it in and finish it. But if you had to pay your duties and your taxes at the time you brought it in before you finished it and were ready to sell it, it's a disadvantage, and it was discouraging that kind of foreign trade and that kind of foreign commerce. That's my understanding of why the foreign trade zone was established. So, no, I don't think you qualify.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah. Once a firm enters the foreign trade zone, what is the tenure of that contract with that company?
The foreign trade zone, what it does is, it's a zone that exists and you have property that's in there. And until it's removed from the zone, either by the property owner who says, I no longer want this included in the zone, or if for some reason they violate, the grantees, they have tariff schedules, which are kind of like the rules that govern the operation of the federal trade zone or foreign trade zone. So unless that status is removed by the grantee or the landowner, it just stays there forever. There is a provision if you have a property that was added and it never activates, not a piece of it activates, you could remove it on that basis, that sort of thing. There's things that you can do to remove it. But otherwise, you'd have to affirmatively take some action to have it removed. But again, from the taxing policy, the taxes are what they normally are unless and until they activate. So you can have many other operations within a foreign trade zone that are being taxed at the normal rate because they don't qualify for foreign trade zone status, or sometimes they just don't even do it because it's a lot of work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I have a motion then to approve consent items 7A, E, G, I, and J?
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Vice Mayor Lord, second from Councilmember Cavalier. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cavalier?
Aye.
Councilmember Osborne? Councilmember Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano? Vice Mayor Lord?
Aye.
Councilmember Sousa?
Aye.
Mayor Kavanaugh?
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
Okay, now we'll move to the business part of our agenda. We'll start with a public hearing to consider adopting a resolution authorizing the city to establish a home detention program. I'll open the public hearing, and Jeff Fine will present.
Mr. Eddie Cruz will be presenting,
Eddie,
Mr. Mayor.
you got it, huh?
It's a little different from out here. Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm here appearing before you tonight to report the results of the home detention pilot program conducted in 2009 following council approval. First, I would like to provide some background information to place the issue in perspective. Home detention is a form of incarceration, and incarceration is only used in criminal cases. Criminal cases constitute 19.98% of the cases filed in the Goodyear Municipal Court. All criminal cases in the city courts are considered misdemeanors. Some examples of misdemeanors: driving on a suspended driver's license, alcohol-related offenses, disorderly conduct, trespassing, and shoplifting. Here's a list of things that the defendants convicted of misdemeanors are commonly sentenced to. For the purpose of today's discussion, we're focusing primarily on incarceration with work release. In certain qualifying cases, defendants may serve a term of incarceration that involve being released each day for work so that they may continue to support their family. Work release is only available in certain detention facilities. Such detention facilities cannot accommodate individuals with significant medical problems, thus creating a dilemma. If you're healthy, you're eligible for work release, so you get to keep your job. If you're not healthy, you're not eligible for work release, and there's a possibility you may lose your job. To mitigate the growing number of individuals who are experiencing this difficulty in pre-qualifying medical leave for detention and work release, a one-year home detention pilot program was conducted. What is home detention? home detention is restricting the mobility and activity to a single location, monitored electronically via a bracelet, restricting alcohol consumption, monitored via a transdermal or breath analysis equipment on a bracelet or installed at a detention location. You may be allowed to leave the premises for work if work release is authorized. When can home detention be used? When authorized by the courts must consider the input of the city prosecutor and any victims involved in the case. The prosecutor may specifically allow or restrict participation in a plea agreement. When the defendant is not considered a risk to themselves or the community, when the defendant does not have a past history of violent behavior, and when a defendant is employed, either eligible for work release. The pilot program was approved by council on December of 2008. The Goodyear Municipal Court commenced the pilot program February of 2009. 43 defendants participated in this pilot program, with their sentences ranging from 2 to 105 days. A total of 1,373 days were served during this pilot program, and the court's backlog of defendants due to delays, the backlog of defendants waiting to serve their sentence due to delays associated with medical pre-qualifications was completely eliminated. During the pilot program, the city saved a total of $101,700 in expenditures associated with jail costs that were averted. Advantages of home detention. The incarceration will begin faster in many cases. Difficulties associated with the medical pre-qualifications is averted. Equality access to work release for those with medical issues. Reduced workload on staff and resources associated with medical pre-qualifications. Defendants are able to do their counseling as well as their incarceration simultaneously. And of course, there's a significant cost savings. Our recommendation is that council consider extending the ability for the city to use the home detention program for a period of 5 years when deemed appropriate by the court and when authorized by law. And I'll take any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you very much. Comments from the public? Comments from the public?
Mayor, I do have Roger Matlin wants to speak on A.
Okay.
Wait, what's the phone ringing for?
No, just ignore it.
Hello.
It happens all the time.
Good evening, Roger Matlin, Goodyear, Arizona. My question on this just had to do with the home release as far as safety to the community. And this popped into my head because I think it was last week, somebody that was drunk over in Avondale, I believe it was, drove her SUV into her neighbor's house or something like that to the living room of the house. And I was just concerned whether or not this could be an issue if somebody is released at home. And is there a possibility that something like that can happen where somebody gets drunk, jumps in their vehicle, and then drives to their neighbor's house and injures their neighbor or their children or something like that, which is obviously a concern for safety here in Goodyear. So in addition to that, it was noted that there are cost savings. I just wanted to know what exactly is it a cost saving to the city, and what is the opinion of the police department as far as this goes. Does this program work in their opinion?
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor, council members, I'll address the cost savings question. Jeff Fine will address the question as far as the recidivism rate, I believe is what he was asking for them to.
Okay.
The cost savings actually comes from the difference of what it costs for home detention as opposed to traditional incarceration. Home detention is, I believe, $15.95 a day. That is paid to the provider by the defendant, and it must be paid in full before they can commence with home detention. So that's where the cost savings were coming from. And as far as the other questions,
Provider.
the provider is actually the company that we use for counseling. As of right now, it is Western Judicial Services.
And it's $15.
$15.95 per day. I believe jail costs right now traditionally are $76.45 a day, with an additional $199 for the first-time incarceration.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Kavanaugh, Council. Jeff Fine, Court Administrator, Goodyear Municipal Court. To answer the question of Mr. Matlin, and it is a good question indeed. First of all, as you'll notice in Mr. Cruz's presentation, that home detention is one of many things that the court utilizes when they, I guess what would you say, punish the offender or apply sanctions to them at sentencing. By the way, of which about 99% of the time is pursuant to a plea agreement that's reached between the defendant and the prosecutor, who represents the cities and the states and the victim's interests. The question is could there be a possibility that somebody could cause this type of accident? Well, let me address that. First of all, it's important to know that a significant amount of the time that's served, that is sentenced, is served through work release. These are misdemeanor cases that in a city court, they're not felonies. And if a person does have a job, unless there is opposition from the prosecution and if the judge feels that they're not a danger, oftentimes people do qualify if they have a job because they're maintaining a household for their family. So the way the way work release was handled is people go to jail, and I think Mr. Cruz mentioned that the fees are about $70 a day, $200 when they walk through the door. They literally are released each day to go to work, and they come back and they sleep at the jail and they go back to work the next day. So it's kind of a hotel situation. We believe home detention has a few advantages over that work release out of the jail system, other than just money. And there's some new technology I received a presentation on, which was on Mr. Cruz called me up. Here's one of the main differences. When somebody is released from the location of home detention, which is usually their home, they wear a device. And this particular device, the devices we're looking at going with soon, we're talking with vendors right now, includes what's called transdermal technology. And what that means is it can monitor their body for alcohol consumption at any time. Let me give you an example. Somebody goes to jail. They release them at 6 o'clock so they can be at work at 7. It is possible that they might not go to work. They might end up going to a bar and having, I guess they're not open at 7. I don't drink in bars in the morning, so I don't know. But I suppose they could go somewhere and down a few, and then it could be out of their body by the time they get back home, because at night there's a device that randomly calls, the vendor calls them, and they have to blow into this intoxilizer device to prove that they're not drunk, they haven't drank anything, and it takes their picture while they're blowing into it to make sure it's them and not their son or their spouse. So we believe that the home detention program that we're discussing, the technology that we are preferring, actually allows us to monitor them for alcohol consumption 24 hours a day. Whereas traditional work release does not. There are other technologies, just so you know. In many cases, people are required to put a device in their vehicle, a vehicle interlock, especially on alcohol-related offenses with driving. So an individual can't even start a car without blowing into this device, and they even do that on first offense alcohol offenses and first offense DUIs. So I'm no scientist in this area, and I haven't done any research, but based on what I can tell in my basic knowledge of the systems, because I interface with the jail on a near daily basis, I believe there's probably less risk of what Mr. Matlin is describing through our form of work release than there is through traditional work release, as evidenced also by the fact that many other cities utilize the same technology that are listed in your COAC. We do have a representative from a company that manufactures this technology, the transdermal devices, and can explain to you both that technology and the technology that tracks their location to make sure that they are only out when they're supposed to be at work and that they are where they're supposed to be when they're not at work. If you have any questions, I'll be available. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Brown?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, I think the question posed to me is, do we support this type of a program? The short answer is yes, we do. These people are still being held accountable. They still have the conviction there. There are still the stipulations and the qualifying for the program so that not just everybody can go into it. So I think given the conditions that there are and, again, the accountability being paid by the person certainly merits this program.
Thank you very much. Other comments from the public? Mr. Gelser?
Gary Gelser, citizen of Goodyear. I have a question. In the presentation, they commented that there were 43 people and there were little under 1,400 days of time served. Could you comment on the success rate? Was it 100% success rate, or did you have people that fell by the wayside and had to be incarcerated? And what was basically I want to know what the success of the program was and why you're recommending this for another 5 years. Thank you very much.
And success is measured as whether or not the person ended up in jail, correct? Okay.
Okay, I just needed to clarify that. We recently had a discussion with the vendor about this very issue. To recap, there were only, first of all, the vendor is required to notify us of any violations. This would be if somebody is not where they're supposed to be at the time that they're supposed to be there, they're not arriving home at time, or if they miss one of those random calls to blow into the device when we use that type of technology. We only had 2 violations during the entire pilot program. Out of the 1,300 days, we had 2 phone calls where they called the house and the person did not respond and blow into the machine. At the subsequent random call that occurred an hour or 2 later, they did respond and we had full compliance. For those first-time offenses, when they fail to do something, we have our marshal contact them and give them a stern warning, advising them they can be pulled from the program if they have a second violation. We did not have a second violation. Therefore, because we had no violations, nobody was pulled from the program and nobody was placed back into traditional incarceration. We've talked with other jurisdictions. We have found that there is high compliance statewide. People simply do not want to risk losing the ability to serve their term of incarceration in this way if they are authorized to do it, because it's something that gives more flexibility, and it's particularly those individuals with medical problems. If we put them in jail, they lose their job.
Thank you. Comments from the public further? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, and I'll ask that council would make a motion to approve the resolution.
Mayor,
Okay, but
I'll read the resolution
okay.
for you.
Mm-hmm.
Adopt Resolution 10-1402, authorizing the city to establish a home detention program for a period of 5 years pursuant to the requirements of Arizona Revised Statute 9-499.07 for persons sentenced to confinement in qualifying misdemeanor cases, including those related to DUI offenses.
Okay, thank you. Could I have a motion?
I'll move.
Second.
Motion from Councilmember Souza and a second from Councilmember Osborne. It's open for discussion. Councilmember Lauritano.
This is something that's obviously right up my alley. I was a prosecutor for 13 years. I do have one question. For the DUI offenses, do they have to do the 48 hours first in jail? I thought that was the statute required that 48 hours had to be.
Yeah, we follow the statute, and it does indicate that their first 48 hours do have to be in confinement.
So these people, just so people know, that they're actually having to sit in
Yeah.
tent city for 48 hours before they actually even go into this program. And I just want to say that I've worked in several jurisdictions that have this. It is a big cost saving. A second offense DUI is like $13,000 jail cost. And although you can tell the offender that you're going to pay the city back, we have to pay up front for that. So I think
Councilmember Osborne.
I had one question. I remember when we started this pilot program, one of the issues of seeing if it was a success was that we only had so much money to either purchase the devices, or there was something to do with the cost of the devices. So I'm not sure if what you're discussing now is something that the person will be paying up front for the rental of the device. I mean, did we only have 43 because we only had 43 devices, or is this something that will be financially in the budget in the future? Can you address that part of the equipment itself?
I believe we only had 43 participants because that's all that qualified for the home detention. As far as the payment of it, the $15.95, so if they're sentenced to so many days, they take the $15.05, add it all up. So if it's 100 days, it's probably over $1,000. They have to pay all that up front. The devices are actually taken to their home and put in there. And the cost that they pay up front to Western Judicial is where they get their financial.
Okay, so they are paying for
They are paying it. They're paying it up front. If they can't pay it up front, they are not eligible for it.
Councilmember Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are the neighbors on either side of the violator advised of the situation?
If there is a victim in the case, they are called in, they meet with the prosecutor, and they do have input into this.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments?
No, I'm in support of it.
Okay, so I've got a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Sousa?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavalier?
Aye.
Councilmember Osborne? Councilmember Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano? Vice Mayor Lord?
Aye.
Mayor Kavanaugh?
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you.
Jeff, thanks. Okay, we'll now consider purchasing streetlight system from APS. Mark Flynn.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be with you again this evening. We're going to do a little follow-up with regard to an issue that had come before the Council previously and then was postponed. Vote was postponed regarding that. I'll provide a little update about the recommendation regarding the history and the background regarding the streetlights in the City of Goodyear, and then be happy to answer any questions that you may have. You may recall that in 2007, the City commissioned the Matrix Study. A consulting group was hired to conduct a citywide assessment as a way to identify opportunities for streamlining and developing efficiencies within city operations. The Matrix Study, the group had provided a report in phases 1 and 2, and in the phase 1 report, management and city staff assessment had determined that it was in the best interest of the city, a best management practice, if you would, to identify how we might be able to streamline the efficiency. One of the items identified was the streetlight system as an opportunity for those best management practices to be applied. The best management practice itself was that streetlights be owned and maintained by a city and not necessarily owned by the private utility company, electrical utility that serves that community. The streetlights at the time were owned and continued to be owned by Arizona Public Service Company, and the report recommendation was that the city should own that streetlight system. The final report identified in the fiscal 2007-2008 period had provided some funding for external evaluation that was conducted by Dawn Happ Lighting Solutions. The evaluation was completed in 2008, and Mr. Happ presented his recommendation to the city at that time. The benefits to owning the streetlight system would allow the city to utilize a better rate, a tariff rate, if you will, for what we pay for electricity. By the city owning the streetlight system, we're entitled to a lower rate for the cost of electricity. Owning the streetlight system also results in some lowered operating costs. We believe that there's an improvement to the service that we can offer to the residents, as well as some flexibility in how we plan for the system and then how we operate the system overall. Was also a recommendation that APS manage the maintenance contract, manage the maintenance of the system for the first 3-year period to allow us a transitional opportunity to allow that transition to be a little bit easier by having APS continue with the maintenance for that 3-year period of time. Based on the recommendations provided in the study that was conducted by DH Lighting, staff had sought council approval to proceed with the purchase. You may recall there have been several council actions to date. We'll do a quick summary of those. But the first council work session was held in July of 2008. Staff presented the benefit cost analysis conducted by DH Lighting Services. No action was required at that time. A COAC was developed detailing 4 options recommended in that analysis. Those 4 options were the utility retaining ownership and maintenance of the system, the city assuming ownership of the system and maintaining maintenance of the system being provided by Arizona Public Service, as what the third option being city ownership and maintenance by a private vendor, and then the fourth option being city ownership and maintenance by city staff. At a council meeting on December of 2008, staff requested council approval to proceed with the purchase utilizing APS for the maintenance and repairs of the system for the first 3 years of operation. Council at that point approved option number 2. At a council presentation held just earlier this year, June 28th of 2010, the item came back before council for reauthorization to continue with the purchase. Staff presented the current terms of the APS streetlight agreement. Again, owning the streetlights in the system owning the streetlights and the benefits associated with the purchase do have the opportunity to create a cost saving for the city related to energy costs. The predominant savings will occur in the energy area. The cost of the purchase of the system is broken down into 4 subsequent agreements. The purchase price, the purchase agreement itself, the maintenance and the energy agreements, and then the license agreement, which is done at no cost. The purchase price currently stands at $420,000 to purchase that system. The maintenance and energy agreements to operate the system at present would be just a shade over $1 million. The savings to the city in energy costs are estimated at $245,000 on an annual basis should the city choose to purchase the system and then hire Arizona Public Service Company to maintain and operate the system on an ongoing basis. Council approval to proceed with the purchase under the new terms will provide the city the operational control that is needed to reduce the cost of operating the streetlight system overall. That $245,000 essentially represents a recurring savings to the city. Contract negotiations with Arizona Public Service had begun in 2009, early in 2009, shortly after you all had made that agreement and voted in favor of the purchase. Finalizing the purchase of agreement to the satisfaction of both parties, though, took a considerable amount of time, actually about 17 months in negotiations in order to complete the agreements in order to authorize the purchase. Negotiations were conducted between the city's legal staff as well as Arizona Public Service Company, and consensus was reached in May of 2010 regarding the terms of the overall purchase. The contract for the city of Goodyear to purchase this system, as I mentioned, assumes the form of 4 different agreements: the purchase agreement, maintenance for the first 3-year period, the energy agreement to provide electricity to that streetlight system, as well as the licensure agreement. The purchase cost calculations were driven by a number of different factors: the number of fixtures, streetlight fixtures within the city of Goodyear, the maintenance cost in order to maintain that system, the energy costs obviously to run them, and then APS had a change in the way they calculated depreciation of the system during the period of that negotiation. So again, with the current option that we're recommending, option 2 is what the city council had previously approved. That's what we're recommending to you this evening, is that we continue to focus on option number 2, which is city ownership and maintenance by Arizona Public Service Company for the first 3-year period. The estimated average yearly cost, just over $1 million, $1.015 million. The one-time purchase cost to establish the system in our name, $420,000, and the estimated yearly savings of $245,000 provides a simple payback window of just under 24 months.
Don't you have those two reversed? Estimated average yearly cost is $420,000, and the one-time cost is $1 million.
Yes.
I apologize. I do. You're right.
Doesn't look right.
Yeah, okay.
No, I'm sorry. The estimated average yearly cost to operate the system, if the city owns and APS maintains, is just over $1 million. The cost of electricity, the cost of the maintenance associated with that system. The cost to purchase the system for the city is $420,000 in a one-time cost. So the $245,000 annual savings represents approximately a 22-month payback period. So no, those numbers are correct.
If we don't do this, our electric bill is $1.3 million.
Yeah, 1.26, yes, for APS to own and maintain the system.
Can I see the previous chart then?
Certainly.
Previous.
Purchase price of $420,000. The maintenance and energy agreements will total $1.015 million, and annual savings is estimated at $245,000.
Yeah, that's.
All right. Thank you.
No problem at all. Again, here's where that number comes into play. The benefits to the city are primarily occurring in the financial area. There's a tremendous cost savings to the city in owning the system. The annual cost for the city, for the system to be owned and maintained by Arizona Public Service, what we would pay to them in the current arrangement is $1.26 million. Annual cost for the city-owned system with a contract for APS for maintenance and energy, $1.015 million. The savings of $245,000 annually has that payback window of about 22 months. Although there are additional benefits to the community that having access to ownership of the system allows us. The issue has come up several times about our ability to take advantage of publicity opportunities, hanging banners on the light poles, seasonal decorations, as well as the idea of the city branding, the All-America logo or the most livable city. We weren't able to utilize banners on those poles because we didn't own them at that point in time. Ownership would allow us access to take advantage of those type of opportunities as well, in addition to the financial savings. The recommendation we're coming to you with this evening is that the system be purchased by the City of Goodyear, and we would feel free to open up to any questions that you may have regarding that recommendation.
Actually, put the last chart up if you would.
Certainly, sir.
Okay.
This one, or?
Yeah, that'll work. Okay.
And maintained.
All right. Comments from the public? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, could I have a motion, please, to approve the purchase?
I've lost my place.
All motion.
We're in B, right?
Yeah. Council reauthorizes.
Authorized streetlight purchase,
All right,
I
Frank.
move.
$420,000. And authorize city manager to execute all related documents.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Cavalier and a second from Vice Mayor Lord. It's open for discussion, and we'll start on this side.
Okay. Couple
Councilmember
questions.
Certainly.
Just so I have set in my head the responsibility for APS and the responsibility for the city. We're purchasing it, but say, for example, there's an accident and the pole goes down. Who replaces that? APS?
The pole would be replaced by APS. Yes.
Okay. Light bulbs?
The maintenance of the system would
Maintenance
also
would be
be managed
APS?
by Arizona Public Service.
Okay.
For the first 3-year period is what we're recommending.
Okay. What is our responsibility for the first 3-year period, other than that we own them?
We would continue to utilize the notification process to alert Arizona Public Service in the event that a light were identified as having burned out or having been damaged. There's a identification tally on every number. There's a process by which, through the city's Ask, Find, Do site, where they can turn those in. They can do that at the APS website, or they come in through our Public Works or our Police Department staff who identify those components.
Do we get any quicker response on replacing those, or let me rephrase it, are they pretty good at replacing those lights when you notify them that a bulb is out?
The current agreement calls for response within a 10-day period of time, although review of our records indicate that we are beating that average on a regular basis.
Okay.
But that's the contractual time frame that's established.
Are you going to have the capability, because these are estimates, I assume, of comparing, because we pay about, 1.3 now for electricity, and are you going to be able to track that within the system just to verify that the actual costs relate into those savings?
Yes, Councilman Pizzol. The bills are tracked on a regular basis. We have a series of 8 accounts that we can establish where the streetlight bills are occurring, and then we track those to determine what our cost of electricity is, and then also check those maintenance fees as well.
Okay. Another quick one. At the end of 3 years, are there any options in there? For example, you do the analysis and you find out it's cheaper for them to maintain it than it is for the city to purchase the equipment. And I'm assuming you're going to need special equipment to get up there to change the bulbs, which means more staff, more vehicles, and you find out it's cheaper for them to do it. Is there a way to continue on that, or after 3 years it's automatically ours?
Councilman Pizzillo, the recommendation we have tonight is that the city purchase the system, so it would be owned by the city of Goodyear, but that maintenance agreement would be for the 3-year window of time. That would allow us the transitional opportunity to keep the established maintenance procedures in place, and then evaluate in the course of the next 3 years whether it's in our best interest to go out and contract for that. There are a number of private firms in the Greater Valley area who provide street lighting services, bulb replacement, pole replacement, mast arm, that type of thing. We would look to coordinate with the procurement office to determine the best interests of the city. Essentially allow Arizona Public Service to provide a bid on a specification that we develop for that maintenance process.
Yeah, the only thing I ask is that when it comes down to that point that we compare, apples with apples to see if somebody else can do it cheaper or we can do it cheaper, that's all.
That's certainly the intent, is that we would write a specification that would allow Arizona Public Service to essentially bid against the private market or the city of Goodyear staff if we chose to pursue it in that fashion. Access to those poles typically would be accommodated through a lift truck, a boom truck, if you will. We do own that in the city. We currently use that for for traffic signal maintenance. So we do have some of that equipment. There may be some other pieces that would be necessary, though, to erect a pole, something that would be strong enough to lift the pole in place while it's being stood up and fastened into its base.
And I think of inventory and storage, too, because I would assume you're going to have some on hand if you take the full maintenance in case of an accident or whatever. So, okay. Thank you.
That's a definite component that would have to be added to the equation. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Further comments on this side?
Yeah, just one question on our new streets that belong to the city, not the developers. Who purchases the new streetlights?
Councilman Cavalier, I'm not sure I understand your question.
All right, do we have any streets that belong to the city, and if we do, that do not have streetlights, and if we want to put streetlights on a city where the city owns the right-of-way, who is responsible for putting the new lights up? Is that the city's?
If the city is not involved in an agreement with a developer who is bringing a new piece of property online.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean.
If that were the case where a developer weren't involved and the city wanted to add lights into that equation, that would be a purchase the city would need to make.
Okay.
And then we have those in our system at that point in time. They would be added to the maintenance agreement with Arizona Public Service because the maintenance contract is based upon the number of poles that exist in the system.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Did you have a conversation with Avondale, Buckeye, Glendale, and Phoenix at all about?
I've spoken with some local municipalities about their decision to either purchase or continue to lease the system. The City of Surprise is probably the largest West Valley entity that continues in an arrangement with Arizona Public Service, although their system is slightly bifurcated. There are a number of poles along Bell Road that they use as a decorative light fixture that has the ability to place that publicity component on the poles. Those are owned and maintained by the City of Surprise. However, all the streetlights in the neighborhoods are owned by Arizona Public Service Company. City of Surprise also uses a streetlight improvement district where either through a homeowners association fee or through some type of an arrangement similar to a community facilities district where the residents pay a fee in order to maintain that system. And that's the primary focus, the primary difference where they have that own system with Arizona Public Service. City of Surprise simply then pays those fees to APS on a regular basis. In terms of municipalities where they have bought the system, the primary driver has been the idea of the lower cost of electricity and the lower operational cost.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Comments here?
To follow up on Councilman Frank's comment. Now, a new developer, develops in the city.
Yes, sir.
New plat, Who, at the present time, who puts up the street lights? Is it the developer?
Yes, sir.
Or the city?
No, currently, the developer installs the streetlights, and then they are deeded to Arizona Public Service Company. In the new model, if the city of Goodyear were to make the decision to purchase the system, the developer would continue to do that, and they would be deeded to the city of Goodyear. Then we would add them to our maintenance and electricity agreement with Arizona Public Service.
So, but at no time would the city be responsible for putting those lights in place?
Not at present, sir, no. Not for the way we've outlined how the system would advance, no.
Thank you.
There may be an opportunity down the line if we had a specialty need or some type of a specialty fixture, but that's not perceived at this time.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
I had two questions. Frank and Dick kind of went over my thoughts about the future. However, you know, we have a lot of plats out there that have not seen development yet.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how many, excuse me, of those developers already have contracts with APS to deed lights over. That we will now, I'd hate to see all of a sudden we find out that there's 50 more lights we have to purchase in the future because some other developer has that in place. Has that been discussed?
The review and the analysis that I performed indicates that those streetlight facilities have been deeded to Arizona Public Service and are in the purchase model that we're discussing here this evening. I'll be honest, I'm not aware of development that hasn't occurred where the transfer of that deed hasn't already occurred. I'm not aware of new development that's pending, but I'll be honest, I didn't ask the question in that specific way.
Just, you know, we're coming across a lot of things that were done 2 years ago that have never seen its fruition, and so, you know, I wondered if that would be...
My understanding is that in those developments, well, in some cases, the streetlights are already erected. The current development policy is when the streets are put in, the streetlights are erected. So other than in developments where literally it's just still bare ground, raw ground, that's probably the only place where that may have occurred. I'm thinking about places like Las Brisas where you have the plat completed and maybe 1 or 2 homes in place, but the number of homes that we had expected to occur hasn't blossomed. But there are streetlights back in those areas. Those have been deeded to Arizona Public Service and are part of the tally, the count, 8,500 plus poles that are being purchased as part of this agreement if it's approved.
My last question is for John. Back when we were having our budget discussions and this was tabled at that time, I'm assuming this is what we're going to consider a one-time purchase of general fund monies, correct?
Yes, it is. It's budgeted. And it's a one-time expenditure because we will be repaid in 2.5 years, or less than 2 years. I mean, so this is a beautiful type of expenditure. It's a great investment from our standpoint.
Right. No, I was just trying to remember back when we were discussing this, and we had, you know,
Yes, it was.
in the vehicles, and
Yes.
it was part of that one-time expenditure.
Yes, it was.
Thank you.
Councilmember Loretano?
Just 2 questions very briefly. On it says in here the electrical conductor connecting the pole would remain APS's. I don't know what that is. Could you explain to me what that is?
I'd be happy to. When the decision was made to pull this off the agenda previously, one of the questions that had come up about was liability for things like theft or vandalism or damage that were to occur. And essentially, in purchasing the system, the city purchases the pole, the conductor that rises from the bottom of the pole to the masthead where the light fixture actually is. But the conductor that goes from pole to pole to pole through the neighborhood remains the property of Arizona Public Service Company. So if there were to be theft that were to occur, if someone were to go into a neighborhood that hadn't yet been developed and steal, wholesale steal copper, for example, and take a long piece of that, the portion that's distribution from pole to pole to pole remains the responsibility of Arizona Public Service Company to replace and maintain. From the handhole, there's a small fused link at the bottom of the pole where you can de-energize it to work on it. From that point up is what's owned by the city of Goodyear. And the question had come up about the liability for theft. You may have seen some articles in the newspaper, and well, it's probably been more than a year now, but in some cases where people were stealing water meters and those types of things, how would that impact our ownership of the system? And we have liability for that if those portions are stolen, but we haven't seen that kind of theft occurring. And there's been some legislation that's occurred that has required somebody who's turning in copper or those types of fixtures, they now have to identify themselves, where before I could just show up and have essentially be a cash transaction. Some of that has slowed some of that type of theft from occurring, so that liability is believed to be less of a concern.
And then my other question is, with the monsoon season, you see these huge, microbursts that are coming through, and I understand what Joe is saying, take one down. My concern is it takes down, 6 or 7. Right now, APS would pay for that.
They do currently, yes.
What happens after our agreement with them runs? Just whoever we get the maintenance agreement with, or how's that?
We would establish if it were to be with another contractor or Arizona Public Service or internal to the city, we would have the responsibility to reestablish those poles at that point in time. The idea of the 3-year transition, I think the attractiveness of maintaining the maintenance relationship with Arizona Public Service allows us time to continue to analyze what companies in the valley may be able to provide that service on an ongoing basis. If I were to project today, I don't think that's a service that I would want to tackle on behalf of the city on an ongoing basis. There would need to be some substantial changes to how we would operate in order to do that.
I'm sorry, quick question. None of those poles are the wood ones anymore, are they? Tell me they're not the wood ones.
No, they aren't. No, Councilmember Osborne.
They won't go down as well as those wood.
And if I could just add one other thing, as many of you know, we purchased a bunch of banners when we became an all-American city, and we have not been able to hang any of those banners because APS has a very strict rule that does not permit banners to be hung from their poles, and they enforce it. One opportunity that we will have, and one opportunity that we're working on, is directional signage that will be with the Cleveland Indians and the Cincinnati Reds that they will pay for, and we will be hanging them from poles. Plus, we will be able to put up, we have 75 banners that we have purchased when we became an all-American city, and we will be able to position those around town also.
And John, just a follow-up, is that something maybe we were talking about signs for some of the businesses that are hidden with the street poles?
I can't hear what you're saying. Mike.
Put some of those signs, like banners like we did, you were talking about for the directional signs for the businesses?
It
like,
could be, yes, theoretically.
Yeah, they're hidden back there.
We would own the poles. We will determine, if you approve this, we will determine what goes up there and what doesn't.
How did we agree on the price of $420,000?
The purchase price was a contract price negotiated between the city and Arizona Public Service based upon the number of poles and then APS's ability to essentially, they changed their depreciation model in order to do that. So there's some establishments through the Corporation Commission about what costs APS can recover, and that's how that number was negotiated. It's in excess of 8,500 poles. I don't know the exact number of poles off the top of my head, but the number of poles had increased from the time we began the negotiation to the time when it was concluded, and that change in depreciation was the major factor in causing that cost to increase.
Mr. Mayor, there was just an article in the paper about Tollison buying their system, and the amount they paid, I think, was like $198,000. We did a quick calculation of that, and they're purchasing their system from SRP, and they were paying about $198 per pole, and ours works out to something a lot less than that.
Yeah, I read that.
That chart there, I think an earlier chart was more clear, was more comprehensive, but you have annual cost for a system owned and maintained by APS is $1.26 million. Annual cost for a city-owned system is $1.015. Should that be annual cost for a city-owned system and APS maintenance?
Yes, it should. That's the way that should read.
Okay, so therefore, in 3 years, that will drop if we take it over after 3 years, maintenance. Or will it?
No, sir.
Because you're going to hire somebody.
We would either...
So how do we, right, so how do we, so...
The $1.015 million, the cost for the city to own and essentially operate the system, we're going to pay that cost to either APS as our maintenance entity, to a private vendor as our maintenance entity, or the city would tackle those maintenance responsibilities internally, and then we would have to gear up for that to occur, whether that be staff, equipment, that type of thing. And that's the analysis that would occur in that first 3-year cycle to determine what's the best way for the city to proceed. Whether we choose to do it internally or we hire a private contractor or the utility company to do it, those are costs that we're going to pay.
Okay, thank you.
You're quite welcome. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, if I may just offer one additional piece of information that may or may not make this easier or harder. We have been meeting with an individual who was brought to us by the mayor, as a matter of fact, who is producing or marketing a new technology, and it's to wrap the poles with a thin solar film. And it's a very advanced application of solar technology, and that would allow us to reduce our energy consumption to APS by at least 15%. in addition to the reduction that we're getting right now. And that's something we're pursuing very aggressively to see if we can do that as one of the first cities in the valley.
Of course, that depends on how much it costs.
It will cost us nothing because they will go to the expense of installing them, and the way they make their money is they then purchase all of the electricity and then they sell it to APS, and there's excess electricity produced from these solar thin solar panels, and so that's how they make their money, and they're paying for the whole thing.
And we're going to be a little bit more greener, aren't we?
If that's the case, then why don't we buy those and put them in ourselves and reap the entire amount instead of saving 15%?
That's certainly an option, Mr. Cavalier, but I doubt that the council. It's certainly an option.
Okay, well, I just thought. Yeah.
Okay, call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, 7-0. We'll now consider adopting a resolution to support and approve Duke Realty's application for the foreign trade zone. Paula Alardo.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We said the reason that we're here tonight is to try to recommend to the Council to approve Duke Realty's application for a general purpose foreign trade zone. This would be the third one that we have in our city today. I'll go very swiftly through this because you've heard a lot about foreign trade zones now, and it had been a year and a half since we heard about it. But since Sarah talked about it, I think we can go through this faster. One of the key things about foreign trade zones is that they are treated as if they're out of the United States, and everything is duty-free to them, and it's based upon the amount that they export or import of either raw materials or end products. And the big advantage, somebody asked, what's the advantage to businesses? Well, if Sarah talked about having an existing building in an FTZ. If there is no existing building and one is built later on and they activate, then the land, the building, their equipment, everything is at a 5% tax value. That's the advantage for business. And we've been told by a business that's looking right now, shortlisted Goodyear, that the only reason they would consider us is if there's an FTZ. It's the only thing that makes us competitive with California's property taxes. So it's a very important tool for economic development. Now, there are two different types of FTZs. What Duke is asking for tonight is a general purpose zone, which it designates a group of parcels. Some of them which may or may not have facilities on them, and those without facilities we're going to term green fields. And I think you might have seen that in the tax policy if you read that, and that was on the consent agenda. There's also a subzone. That does not have to be anywhere near a general purpose zone. It can be for a facility that a user comes in and says, they qualify and they want the foreign trade zone in that one facility, they can get subzone approval. Okay, what other cities have this? Well, Mesa and the city of Phoenix have FTZs. And both of those cities run their FTZs. Now, any subzone that's in the valley is under the city of Phoenix. There are a lot of them in the valley. An example is Intel plant in Chandler is the Phoenix subzone. There's a Conair plant in Glendale, for instance, that's a subzone of Phoenix. Now, when all the West Valley cities decided that they wanted to have a foreign trade zone, we did it a little differently and decided to go together as a group to form the Greater Maricopa Foreign Trade Zone, which is a huge general purpose zone overlaying all the cities you see up there. That's basically what we agreed to join when Council approved that in July of '09. At that time, we told you that it would be about a year before it was approved. At the time, it took about until December to turn in the application. Cities kept coming on board, et cetera. We're very lucky that Westmark has decided to be the nonprofit grantee, and they've contracted with IMS Worldwide, who is Curtis Spencer, who is in the audience, if you have any questions. And we've been very lucky to work with him. Harry went to Foreign Trade Conference, came back and said basically, boy, he is the expert in the country on this. So he's helped Westmark form and be established as the grantee. He's organized our application process and the submittal in December of '09 and has been tracking it through his contacts through the federal system. At this point, it appears that it's 2 weeks until the Federal Trade Board's examiner's signature finally is on the document. And at that point, it's about another month for the cursory signatures of the Cabinet Secretaries of Commerce, Treasury, and Homeland Security. So at this stage, we're basically expecting it before December of 2010. Do you have any new news? Okay. We're just waiting patiently. Now, just to go over really briefly, the role of that Greater Maricopa FTZ is that it really does save the money, the city money up front. We didn't have to form this. It's the developers who are actually fronting the money for this. And basically, we have membership on the board of the GMFTZ. Harry has been named the chairman of that board because he was so instrumental in putting this idea of all the communities together. We have to credit Fred Stiles of EJM, who came to Harry and asked, can we have a foreign trade zone? And it was Harry's idea to get a lot of cities together in doing this, and worked very hard on that. So the benefits of the FTZ, someone asked, what are the benefits? Well, it really helps us attract companies, and there are a lot of companies today that are global. More and more companies are going to qualify for this as you know, the global generation proceeds. And we found that most of the FTZ companies do have the higher paying jobs. And it puts us on the list for site selectors, because there are site selectors who will look for nothing but FTZs. Like we said, we're currently shortlisted for a company who said, if you don't have an FTZ, we're not even looking at you. We currently, in July of '09, when you approved the Greater Maricopa Foreign Trade Zone, you also basically supported the formation of 2 general purpose zones. Those were EJM's and Suncor's. This is EJM's, 230 acres on Van Buren. Basically, this is what we call greenfield because there's no building on it currently. The other one was the Palm Valley, which Suncor originally, of course, made the application, and now it's owned by Sunbelt Holdings, and Sub-Zero is in that building. That's an example of one where you have a current building and a lot of it, the rest of it is greenfield. And that is one of the reasons the Sub-Zero went in there, because it had a foreign trade zone. Now we're proposing the 3rd general purpose foreign trade zone site, and that's Duke's Goodyear Crossing. It's 198 acres. It's both improved sites and greenfields. 128 acres of that area is greenfield. The area will include the Amazon.com building and Goodyear 1, which has Kaiser Panel and Suntech in it. It will not include the Macy's site because Macy's owns their own site. Now, you may say, well, so does that mean that that Amazon.com is going to go into this? Not necessarily. Right now, we don't know that the qualifier would want to. There can be businesses, as Sarah said, in a federal trade zone that doesn't activate, doesn't go through the process, and can just, operate there forever as a non-activated site. In fact, nationally, only about 15% of the buildings in these kind of general purpose zones actually activate. So there's a big expense. Someone has said, what does it take to do this? I mean, it could cost as much as $100,000 to activate. You may need two employees to keep tighter inventories and to work with the customs officials on all the paperwork. So you don't do this on a willy-nilly basis, basically. The benefits of having Goodyear Crossing as our 3rd general purpose zone is that it has direct rail access. None of the others do. And what it does is it evenly distributes our FTZs along our major transportation corridors. EJM is basically off of I-10. The Sunbelt Holdings is off of Loop 303. And Goodyear Crossing is at MC 85 and has the rail access. This is a great advantage. They already have a company that has shortlisted them and Goodyear in hand, and one of their key requirements is an FTZ and rail. This could also possibly help maintain some current Goodyear companies that are now that are not foreign trade zones now, but will need to be in order to stay and get the benefit of it. We've already gotten the school district's letters of support. That's Avondale Elementary and Agua Fria Union High School District. And should any existing companies, say, form there in the future, the city will, let's say it's an Amazon.com, would go, and they're already paying 20%. As Sarah said, we will maintain the 20% that's already on the tax rolls by the 5% tax assessment and the 15% pilot fee that makes up the difference. So the action to be taken tonight is to adopt the resolution supporting Goodyear Crossing's application to be a general purpose foreign trade zone within the general Maricopa foreign trade zone. Any questions?
Thank you.
You've heard a lot about foreign trade zones tonight now, right?
Okay, comments from the public? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, ask the city clerk to read the resolution by title only.
Adopt Resolution 10-1405, supporting and approving Duke Realty Corporation's application for general purpose foreign trade zone status, authorizing staff to take any future action necessary, including execution of applicable documents in relation to this FTZ within the greater Maricopa foreign trade zone.
Could I have a motion to approve the resolution, please?
Adopt the resolution.
Second.
Motion from Councilmember Souza, second from Vice Mayor Lord. Open for discussion. Seeing none, could I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Osborne?
Aye.
Councilmember Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lord?
Aye.
Councilmember Sousa?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavalier?
Aye.
Mayor Kavanaugh?
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
Okay, that completes business on this particular agenda. We will go into a special meeting and likely executive session after this meeting concludes. Right now, comments on current events by any of the council members. Councilmember Pizzillo?
Just real quick, was at the Relay for Life this Saturday, great event, and Mayor was there as well. I don't know if any other council members, but great cause, and I just want to know, I'm hoping they raised a lot of money for cancer. I'm not sure what their numbers were, but I hope they did a good job. It's a great event.
Thank you for doing what you did. You made the opening speech.
Yeah.
I think it was $27,000.
Was there that many? Yeah.
$27,000.
Yeah, well, good.
But that was the early evening.
Okay, good.
So there was more later. Okay, City Manager, any comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I just want to draw your attention to the October 18th meeting we're planning for the City Council. It's going to be a mini retreat, and I wanted to tell you about the two items that we're planning to discuss with you. The first topic is going to be related to financial reporting, and we will review with you all of the different financial reports that we currently provide to the Council, and we will also be making recommended changes, additions that we're recommending be made, and then also ask if there's other reports that you want to see. So that'll be the first topic. The second topic will be a comprehensive review of the City Center and higher education initiative projects. We're going to be providing you, prior to the work session, probably a half-inch thick folder that's going to include all of the information that we have accumulated over the years that we've been working on this project. Everything from master plans, project agreements, building designs, Phase 1 project costing, financing, and all of that. So we're going to allow you to review that before the work session, and then we will make a brief presentation about that information and what's in the book for the benefit of the public, and then we will open up the discussion to you. And what we're hoping to achieve that night is to have a lot of different policy issues that you want to discuss to come up. There are at least 3 that we plan on discussing with you. One of them is the 140-acre master plan that we have talked about in the past and then put off till this evening to discuss with you. That will be the proposal to update the 140-acre master plan that we have right now. That was proposed with Rob Langford at the July 12th work session, and it was deferred until a later date. We will also be looking at the master plan update, such as the university consortium concept rather than separate campuses. And is council okay with moving elements that are on the master plan right now, such as the Performing Arts Center, moving it to the other site, the 100-acre, and so it's a kind of a reconfiguration of the site. Then we will also be talking about the city center phase and project financing. And this, we will ask questions such as, does the council wish to consider a floating property tax rate in order to cover the debt service payments for the city center or for education? Those are things that came up at prior discussions, so we hope to discuss that with you. Also, if so, is it desired to pursue only conventional financing, and that's going to be determined, that's principal and interest, or is the council willing to have us enter into agreements that will be interest-only bonds for, say, 10 years, because that allows us to borrow additional monies, but it also is riskier when you do that. The third area that we're going to talk about is reviving the higher education initiative. Does the council wish to pursue additional higher education partnership opportunities through the issuance of a new RFI? If so, what are the desired terms to include in that RFI, such as reduced land lease rates, city contribution towards infrastructure, or other financial assistance towards the projects that we may or may not be willing to offer? And then finally, are there specific types of colleges that the RFI should seek, or are we just looking for a general education? So those are some of the areas that we've already identified that we want to discuss that evening, and then it's going to be an open discussion for any other areas that you all want us to pursue. So I just wanted to give you that heads up. We hope to get the booklet to you probably early next week, and we will be reviewing all of that at the 18th work session, which starts at 4 in the afternoon. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Could you include in your presentation an update on the ASU relationship?
That is, yes, it is.
And what they're asking for?
Yes, certainly.
An update on that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay.